Welcome to our second emotional safety workshop. I'm Shay Malone. I am the owner and lead facilitator, lead family advocate at 360 Citizens. We are a trauma informed, neurodivergent affirming family support service provider, and we focus on providing tools and services to help families be emotionally aware, emotionally supportive, be safe, successful, and whatever else we can do to make people's lives better. We're going to get started with our workshop. Our first one was of heroes and villains, and this one is just called emotional safety. This is recorded and will be available both for replay and for purchase later. I was told from the last one that I needed to do an informed consent, so I will. Because of the nature of the content, we talk about emotional safety, we talk about childhood. A lot of our work is around childhood trauma, and so it may bring up discomfort, it may bring up anxiety, a lot of anxiety. It may be triggering in some ways, and so I would recommend that if it does do that for you, if it does trigger anything or bring up anything, that if you need to take a break, please take a break, get water, deep breathe, step away if you need to. Again, it will be available for replay, so you don't have to watch it all at once. I'm thankful for everybody who is in attendance today, and at the end we will do Q&A. And I guess one last disclaimer. So when I did the slides for this, I also did the notes for this, and in true neurodivergent fashion, I also left my notes. And so I will be winging this. But this is what I do all day, every day, so it should still be pretty good. And let's just hope the technology cooperates, because I had to close all 432 tabs and browsers in order for it to work. So, this workshop is about emotional safety, and it's called The Heart of Healthy Connection. And really, emotional safety is, I think, what love is. It allows you space to be yourself. It sees you, it knows you, and it still values and appreciates you. One of the things that I often say is that the quality of your relationships determines the quality of your life. When you have good, supportive, solid relationships, your life improves significantly. And conversely, when you have relationships where people are pulling you down or tearing you down, then you're going to feel that. Unfortunately, as we'll see, the quality of our early relationships can continue to determine how we feel. Somebody needs to do better editing, and it's me. Because what? Anyway, so this should say what is required for a healthy relationship. A lot of us are looking for how to have better relationships, how to communicate better, how to whether it's at work, whether it's at home, whether it's in our community groups. We're looking for how to be someone who's liked and likable, and to be with people who make us feel good. And so we'll look at what's required for a healthy relationship. We have 5 different topics. We're going to talk about why self-esteem is misnamed, and it is really other esteem. The fact that relationships are life and death. That if you're going to have a relationship, healthy relationship, then you need healthy people. Everybody has different capacities, and that matters. And finally, we'll look at the tools that are required to build healthy relationships, especially if you're coming from dysfunctional relationships. Okay, so we will start with self-esteem is really other esteem. I believe it's one of my favorite comedians, Cat Williams, who and I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss in my own workshops, but he basically, there's a joke and he says like, you're looking to others for your self-esteem, but self-esteem is the esteem of your GD self. But it's not like we don't create our own self-esteem. All right. So I created this bubble, um, and you'll see it a couple of other times in this presentation. But in this particular presentation, we're going to look at the ecosystem and the development of self-esteem. We are in the core and the center of our lives. Ooh, do I have a pointer? Because that would be great. Draw on page. I do. Oh, and I can get it in purple. Oh, no. Just kidding. I thought it was a highlighter. It's a draw. I don't need to draw. Anyway, back to. Oh, okay. I do have one. All right. So at the top, at the 12 o'clock, we have the home environment. What we know from research is that what happens in our life while our mother is pregnant in the years between birth and 3 are the most impactful time in our brain development. It sets the foundation of our ideal of, is the world safe or is the world not safe? And so that is what we have to consider when we think about that. We need to understand that the people in our home, the environment, our neighborhood, the relationships between the people in our home, how they talk to each other, how they interact, all of that actually affects how our nervous system develops. Then we look at our primary caregivers. Okay. This is where we begin to form our attachment and our ideas of whether or not we can trust the person to meet our needs. When we cry, do they come and comfort us? Do we get picked up? Do we get held when we need comfort? One of the biggest debates in caregiving and parenting is about babies and sleep because in the current schedule for most people, babies do not sleep on a very inconvenient schedule. They often start out with their days and nights flipped. They sleep in bursts. They don't sleep through the night initially. And so the idea of getting them to sleep through the night becomes a big thing, for one, because parents are tired or whoever the caregiver is tired because babies are exhausting. If the mother is the one caring for the child, she's dealing with hormonal and emotional changes, life changes. Every baby is different. And so even if you've had 3 or 4 babies and you have like that 5th baby, then that's still a very different experience each time. You don't know how your body's going to respond. You don't know what kind of child you're going to get. My 3rd child is my first child with allergies. How dare he? He is allergic to dairy and eggs. Very inconvenient. But anyway, all of these things come into play how your primary caregivers perceive the role of children and adults. Are children people that you have to nurture, that you have to consider, or are they burdens that you have to care for? Are they extensions of the caregiver themselves who don't have their own autonomy? All of that will come into play in how you're treated, how you're responded to, and that becomes part of the mirror that becomes how you see yourself. Okay. If there are other adults in the home, so your primary caregiver, but there may also be another adult in the home or other adults in the home, depending on your home makeup, how they interact with each other. There may be conflict over how to raise children, how children should be disciplined is often a huge source of conflict, how they should be cared for, whether they have to wear hats outside in the cold, whether they have to wear hats after washing their hair, things like that can be sources of conflict or tension. Do the adults in the home believe in teaching the child like about their environment, about what's going on? In our first workshop, we talked about the natural state of a baby is anxiety because they're completely reliant on others for protection, for safety, for care. And if you have tension on top of that, um, that doesn't relieve the anxiety, it increases the anxiety. Whereas if you have people who are able to regulate their own feelings, who understand the importance of talking to that baby, that young child, telling them about what's going on, what's happening, who they are, all of that is going to impact it. Down here we have siblings. Um, the number of first children and oldest children who have resentment towards their younger siblings is not minor. There are a lot of them. One of the most popular books about siblings is called Siblings Without Rivalry. And there are a lot of really illuminating, but also like horrible stories about how we carry the interactions with our siblings into adulthood and how it shapes how we see ourselves. Did our parents intervene? Did our caregivers show preferential treatment? Are our siblings a source of support or a source of conflict? All of that will play into it. Your cultural identity. So in the US, race is a primary identifier. Faith is one of the cultural markers that you may be impacted by. Language, immigration status, gender. Gender is a huge thing. We live in a patriarchal culture, and that means something. That means that your gender, or for those who use sex at birth, that will impact how you are viewed in a lot of places. In a lot of homes, for example, girl children have higher expectations than boy children, especially when it comes to things like housekeeping. On the other hand, boy children may have certain restrictions on how they can express themselves because it's not boy-like or it's too girly. And so again, these are the things that will affect you. The community you grow up in, lower income, middle income, higher income, suburbs, rural, city, All of those things. Is it a close community? Is it a small community? Do you have church community, or a house of faith community? Do you have different social communities? So, for example, if your caregivers are part of Greek communities and they are actively participating, then that will also affect how you see them, how you see yourself, things like that. Neighbors can impact how you see yourself. These are the people you come in contact with just by the nature of how you live. Um, they may make comments about you or your family. They may treat you and your family a certain way. Um, you may be supported, or you may feel harassed. Um, and that is going to shape part of how you see yourself. The primary occupation, once a child hits about age 4 or 5, is going to be school. Um, most people in the US are public school students. Public school takes up a significant portion of time. If your family is a working family, you may have been in daycare. So the environment of your daycare, the environment of your school, all of those things are going to impact you. Your work will continue to impact you, but it really is kind of rooted in school. A lot of times, how we see ourselves: are we smart? Are we stupid? Are we competent? Are we ditzy? Are we popular? Are we weird? Like, those are the types of things, and that goes hand in hand with peers, right? So our peers also have a huge impact on how we see ourselves. Who accepts us? Who rejects us? What do they say about us? If you go to a school where it's pretty diverse, you're much more likely to be accepted with a wide range of behaviors, whereas schools that are less diverse tend to be more exclusionary or particular in which behaviors are acceptable and not acceptable. And so I put this together really just to give a picture of all of the influences that go into who we are. And I think it's important because a lot of times I talk to clients and they are like, oh, well, that's just how I am. Or they'll make a statement that assumes, oh, I'm just this way. We come with an inbuilt personality of who we are and how we are. But we have all of these different influences that shape who we are. If you engage with young children at all, you will notice very often that if a young child does something that makes the people around them laugh, they'll do it again and again because they're getting that positive reinforcement and feedback. That's a lot of how our personality and who we are is shaped. Do we do things like, is who we are at our core, is that acceptable? Is it taken in? And that's really the heart of emotional safety. Like, is who we are safe with other people? Or if it's shunned, then we begin to bury or repress that part of ourselves. And when we repress that part of ourselves, we forget that that's part of our personality. Or if we're heavily controlled and we're not allowed to make decisions for ourselves, then we may not really have an idea of who we are, of what we like, of what makes us different. For some people, they don't really see themselves outside of who they are to other people, right? They are fundamentally emotionally unsafe because safety is equated with being someone that they're not actually. And so that should transition us to boom, relationships are life or death. This is, it sounds really dramatic. Like, what do you mean? Like, am I really gonna die? Kind of is the answer. Oh, look, y'all. It's the same map we've been looking at for the past 15 minutes. Okay. I don't like repetition, so I will try to make this one a little bit shorter, but this is about how we attach and what that attachment looks like and why relationships truly are kind of life and death, at least emotionally and psychologically. Okay. So I'm not going to go over like everything I just went over, but here, our main, oh, I might actually draw on it. I just want y'all to know that I sound just like this when I am working with people too, just in case y'all thought I wasn't just as weird. All right, so this is our primary attachment. This is where our root of attachment forms, right? It is us and our primary caregiver. And if y'all recall, I was just saying that, like, if that person meets our needs, is my cursor going to be purple now? Nope, still blue. Anyway, if our primary caregiver meets our needs and we feel safe with them, then we are going to have what is considered secure attachment. Okay. We are going to trust that good things will happen. We are going to trust that we can be ourselves, that who we are is acceptable, that we don't have to hide. And this does not excuse. So, people with secure attachment, it's not that they don't have anxiety. It's not that they don't have stress. It's not that they don't get sad. Those are all things that everyone experiences at different points in times. The difference is they don't live with that. People who grow up fundamentally feeling okay with themselves, okay? They don't live with constant anxiety. The flip side of that is going to be the insecure attachments. And there are three main types of insecure attachments. There is anxious attachment. And you can think of this as kind of clingy attachment, like, I'm not sure you're going to meet my needs, so I'm going to ask questions and I'm going to over explain to make sure that you think I'm okay. I am going to check in frequently to make sure we're okay. Um, in the development process, kids have various stages of separation anxiety, as they call it, where they need to check in more frequently. And that's normal. It happens more frequently when they're young, between those ages of 0 and 3, but it continues throughout childhood. Generally, when a child has a significant cognitive shift or developmental shift, or if like there's a major trauma or a major change, then a lot of times we'll see a child become more anxious. They may become more childlike in their behaviors. Um, and we see this in adults too. So that's anxious. That's one of the insecure attachments. The second insecure attachment is avoidant. Avoidants do not trust their connections. They do not trust that other people will meet their needs. They're often very guarded. Um, they may connect with people, but in small amounts and small doses. Um, Opening up feels very scary because they don't trust that their needs are going to be met and they don't trust that they're not going to be rejected. And so they may shut down. This is a child who may seem disinterested in connecting to others. This is a child who um, will try to do everything themselves. Not to confuse that with the regular pursuit of autonomy that kids have, where they want to do things themselves so they can prove their competence, because that is different. But this is a thing where even when they need stuff, they won't ask. And in adults, it shows up like not joining communities, or joining communities and showing up for a little bit and then leaving back out, unless they get to the point where they start to feel safe. The more intimate, the closer a relationship gets, the scarier it gets for avoidance. And so they may dip out, disappear, hide. They may seem like they're not hiding because some of them stay connected, but they'll stay connected as long as it's only superficial, as long as there isn't a lot of emotional demand or expectation. For some reason, and we'll go into this more when we have our relationship workshop, uh, anxious, anxious attachers and avoidant attachers very often tend to end up together. And there becomes this whole cycle of pursuit and withdrawal, where the anxious pursues to find security and the avoidant withdraws to find security. Um, Very common pattern. The third one is disorganized attachment. And it's really just a blend of anxious and avoidant, push me, pull you kind of thing. Um, they may start out really like clingy and then withdraw and stay withdrawn and then come back and be clingy. They may start out the other way. They may be avoidant initially, and then if they start to feel you pull away, they may get clingy. We have attachment as a necessity for the foundation of our relationships, because as a child, when you don't have someone that you're connected to, a primary person or primary people that you're connected to, you are literally in danger. And so, what does that look like? Physically, that looks like, if I am a child, I cannot feed myself, I cannot source food, I cannot take care of myself, I cannot get the things I need. And if I am not attached, if there is no one connected to me, I am literally going to die. Okay? So that's the physical piece. But there's also an emotional component, right? Humans are social creatures. We need acceptance, we need belonging. Those are the things that signal to our brains that we are safe, we will be taken care of. And when we don't have those, when we have parents or caregivers who treat us like a problem, um, who act like caring for us is hard, who mistreat us, then we don't have a sense that we are going to stay alive. And we are constantly on the lookout for a threat that the person that we're attached to is going to leave. Right? So the emotional abuse or neglect is a signal that that person could leave and that we could die. We have studies that, and I'll have to check if they've been updated, but we have studies from orphanages that the children were given the physical care, but without the emotional component. No affection, no touch. We now know the importance of human touch for health, both physical and emotional. Those children had failure to thrive. They were malnourished, even though technically they were getting everything they needed. And I believe, if I recall correctly, some of them died as well. I don't think we can do those studies these days because of human rights, and I think that's correct. But it is illuminating that when we could do those, we learn things like that. And so relationships are literally life or death when we're young. Now, once we become adults, what happens is when we feel those same triggers that we felt as children, those signals that someone doesn't care for us or may leave us or may hurt us, that brings us right back to feeling like children. Even though we're adults, we have that same sense of fear or terror in some cases that we are going to be left alone, that we are going to be abandoned, and that we could die, right? The brain does not differentiate between, oh, you're an adult now, you can take care of yourself. The brain is like, no, you need a person. If you don't have a person, you're going to die. Okay? Okay. So that is attachment. That is why emotional safety matters. Being able to give it, knowing what it looks like, and being able to receive it, because we don't want our body to be in a continual state of distress and worry and anxiety that we won't have our needs met. Okay, so what do we do when we're worried that our needs won't be met? Right? When we have some type of threat that we will be abandoned or left alone, or that we are not safe with the person that we need to be safe with, we have one of 4 stress responses. 2 of them are toward, 2 of them are away. And I don't think I organized them like that, but it's fine. I will say it as we go. When people talk about adrenaline responses, you often hear about the fight or flight response, which is why I put those 2 first. Fight is when, hold on, because I'm reading this, y'all. Okay, so I did the top part, but I didn't do the bottom part. I will fix that before I send these out. So y'all can ignore the paragraphs underneath it. We'll just go with the headings on top. Fight is when you feel like you're in danger and you begin to defend yourself. Okay. So fight doesn't necessarily mean physical conflict, although it can, because sometimes when people are triggered, they literally will fight to keep their person. But what it more often means is that we engage in a series of either verbal tactics or actual actions that say, hey, I am worthy of being connected to. You stay here. I'm a good person. I am a valuable person. Don't leave me. Flight comes when it feels too dangerous. We move away from the source of danger, and that may be our person, our connection person, our primary caregiver. Flight may be physical, right? We may take some time away from the person when we're older. When we're younger, we may literally run away. We may go hide. Flight, however, can also be mental. So if you're not familiar with the term dissociation, I would encourage you to look into it more. One of the things that our brain does when it's in too much danger is it just takes off. Okay. It's like, oh, this is not safe. I cannot escape physically. And that's often what happens when we're in some type of trauma. We can't escape physically, and so our brain escapes mentally and we leave. And so sometimes when we don't have memories of something, it's because our brain has taken off, right? That is another type of flight. It is an escape from. Now, there are two other stress responses that are a smaller scale of fight or flight, right? Freeze is when we kind of just get stuck. And that can look like if you're in the middle of a conflict that's bringing you stress and someone is talking to you, you may just say, I don't know, that's fine. Okay. Like you may. And so our freeze, what do you mean I'm offline? You know what? It's fine. You may get to a place where you cannot do or say what you really want to do or say. And then the last one is fawn. And this is really instead of defending yourself in a more aggressive way or a more proactive way, fawn is really where we defend ourselves and we try and preserve that connection by, so people may be familiar with the term people pleasing, right? How can I make myself more acceptable to you so we preserve this connection? And so we may explain that we didn't mean to hurt them, that we're sorry. One of my early indicators that somebody has had childhood trauma is the people who say sorry for everything, because that tells me that they've been conditioned to placate other people a lot. It also kind of tells me that they feel sorry for existing. So fawn is this pleading stance of please accept me, please find me acceptable, please don't leave me because I am not a threat to you. I lost the S in survival mode. All right. So, in order to have healthy relationships, you have to have healthy people in those relationships. One of the things that I have come to see and hear that bothers me is when people tell people, especially that are, for example, getting divorced, that like there are two sides to the story. It can't just be one person's fault. Well, my friends, I am here to tell you that it takes two people that are healthy to maintain a healthy relationship. And we have two main dynamics. We have adult-child dynamics, and we have adult-adult dynamics. And what happens is that very often people confuse adult-adult dynamics with how adult-child dynamics should work. When you are considering it, if the two people in the relationship are healthy, we want to look at responsibility. So, like, who is responsible for managing this relationship? We look at accountability and we look at power. So, if we start with a parent and child relationship or caregiver and child, the caregiver holds all of the power at the beginning of a child's life. Okay? The caregiver continues to hold almost all of the power throughout the child's life because it is very difficult for a child to be independent of their adult until they're 18. And even then, caregivers who do not want to relinquish power will do things to extend their control over their child. And so, who holds the power? In a parent-child, caregiver-child relationship, the caregiver, because they hold the power, is the person who is primarily responsible, who should primarily be held accountable. However, that is not often what actually happens. What often happens is that we have caregivers who hold power. However, they may not feel like they have the power. Okay? They may not recognize that they have the power. Most often, that's because of how they were treated as children, right? And so they may treat the child like they are responsible, and a child may be held responsible for a caregiver's feelings. The child may be the one that's held accountable for when things go wrong or when negative things happen. And that inverts the relationship. You have a child who is then told that they have all the power without holding the actual power. This is where we get a lot of the anxiety and depression that lives with us for life. This is where shame starts to develop because children are egocentric and all they can try and figure out is, well, what's wrong with me? Because if this reality isn't matching my perception, why is that? Without that explanation, they are going to assume that they are responsible for keeping everybody happy, managing all of the positive and negative in a relationship. Now, when it comes to adult relationships, it's different. Two adults are supposed to be equally in power, equally responsible, equally accountable. However, what often happens is kind of this same thing. We have an over-functioning adult and an under-functioning adult. The over-functioning adult is often the child who had the inverted power dynamics. And now they feel like that it's their job to make sure that the other adult is happy because otherwise they will leave them. And this is where we see that attachment come into play. This could look like making excuses for the other person, allowing them to treat you like a child because that's how you already feel. It may look like not holding the other person accountable for harm, not being able to set boundaries. From the underfunctioning side, the person who underfunctions often is dealing with something that's called learned helplessness. They were prevented from having power, and they have relinquished it even as an adult. And so even if they say, I'm going to do this, they often feel limited in their ability to actually follow through on things. They feel like the other person has to be the person to take care of things because they aren't equipped. They don't know how to do that, right? And so if you have one person who's saying, I don't know how to do that, that's your job, and you have one person who thinks that it's their job, then you don't have a 50-50 or 60-40, 40-60, a reasonably balanced relationship. What you have is one person who is taking 80 to 100% of the responsibility and one person who's taking 0 to 20%. Interestingly, what happens is, although both people in this situation feel powerless, somebody is more likely to assert power and dominance or power and control. And so that's another thing we'll get into when we do our relationship workshops. That will be a series of 3. But this is just kind of a snapshot of what it looks like. And so you really cannot have a healthy relationship if you don't have 2 people who are both responsible, both accountable, both sharing power. You don't have a healthy caregiver dynamic if the person who holds the power is placing it without relinquishing it on the other person. Okay, so this one's going to be super short. This is just our map again, but instead of just your home and yourself, it's 2 people. So this is for adult relationships, right? Now, as an adult, you're coming into scenarios where you have your personality that's been shaped by all of these things, right? And then you have this other person who has their own personality that's been shaped by all of these things, right? And so when you have disagreements, when you have conflict, it's not just you and them and the current conflict, it's you and all of your stuff, plus them and all of their stuff, and whatever the conflict is triggering in both of you. And that goes for friendships, that goes for in the workspace, that goes for relationships, right? Emotional safety is about, 1, understanding your own self and understanding that people are different and not feeling threatened by those differences, and making space to be able to understand the other person and accept the other person, right? But everyone does not have the same capacity, right? People who are highly anxious, highly defensive, highly scared of being vulnerable, right? That's going to limit capacity. Intellectual capacity limits capacity. So we don't talk about IQ very often when we talk about trauma. We don't talk about neurodivergence very often when we talk about trauma, but we should, because your ability to handle complexity and nuance is part of capacity, right? A person's ability to understand themselves as neurodivergent, understand like being overstimulated by sensory things makes them cranky, right? Do they have the understanding of that and how it impacts the relationship they have with you? Do you understand how somebody else's aggressiveness or anger from overstimulation impacts you? So the reason capacity matters is a lot of times when we have difficult relationships, whether it's with our caregivers, whether it's with our partners, whether it's with our friends, when we have relationships that are complicated, sometimes we think things like, oh, we just need to communicate better. Oh, well, if they go to therapy, it'll be fine. They may not have the capability, the capacity, or the safety, right? Because in order to expand your capacity, you have your emotional capacity, you have to have a certain amount of emotional safety. So this slide is a paraphrase of Aristotle. Nature abhors a vacuum. What one person lacks in a relationship, the other person has to compensate for in order for the relationship to work. Okay? So if one person is emotionally absent, then somebody else has to be emotionally present and managing in order for the relationship to work. If one person is making sure everything is taken care of, then the other person doesn't have to make sure that anything is taken care of because it's not required for the relationship to work. And so that's another piece of capacity, right? Can this person, like if you withdraw your part, if you do less of what you do to make space for them to do more, do they have the knowledge? Do they have the tools? And do they have the capacity? Or is it going to be too threatening to them? Is it going to make them feel too vulnerable? And are they going to shut down instead? All right. So our last section is going to be the tools that are required to build healthy relationships. And so these are the things that you need to begin to become healthier yourself and for the other person to also become healthier if they are not emotionally safe, right? So health and safety go together. The more emotionally healthy you are, the more regulated, the more nuanced, the more empathetic. That allows you to be a safe space for other people. And how does that happen? One, you need your own safe spaces. In order to be emotionally safe, you need to see what it looks like. You need places where you can be yourself. You need to have people who don't shame you, don't reject you. And this repair comes primarily in actual relationships. And so you don't generally find healing by being apart from other people. The second piece is regulating your nervous system, right? So when we talked about the stress responses, the fight, flight, fawn, and freeze, all of those are your nervous system shooting out danger signals. It starts producing cortisol, which is our stress hormone, and continual output of cortisol increases the inflammation in our body, which is why a lot of autoimmune disorders are actually trauma responses. How do we regulate our nervous system? We counteract the things that happen to our body when it's in stress response, right? So if our body thinks that we're in danger, one of the main things that happens, for example, is we begin, like our breath becomes shorter. We use less air. So one of the counters to that is deep breathing. When we deep breathe, when we slow down and we inhale, hold, exhale, we force oxygen into our body and brain, and it signals, hey, we are safe enough that we have time to breathe. Bringing ourselves back into our body is a little tricky because sometimes that feels very not safe, but generally it can be something that helps us feel safer, reminding us that we're in the present. So something like the 5 senses grounding, where you do 5 things you can see, 4 things, I'm not going to do this correctly, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can, I don't know, and then like something you can taste. Crunching on ice, things that kind of shock the system into being in the right now instead of where your brain is, which is in the future or in the past. The third one is boundaries. Boundaries is really hard, but boundaries are the things that we use to protect ourselves. They are not rules for other people. They are fences for our house, right? And so this may look like, I'm not going to allow anybody to curse at me because it dysregulates my nervous system. This is not telling somebody who's cursing at you, don't curse at me. We cannot control other people. What that looks like is if someone is cursing at you and you know it's triggering you, you can tell them, I don't like being cursed at, please stop. And if they don't stop, it looks like removing yourself, hanging up, disconnecting from that person because they're not safe. This teaches your body that you have the ability to protect yourself, as well as reducing the amount of triggers that you're experiencing. And the last one probably should have been the first one. It all goes together. Learning yourself. This is, what do I like? What don't I like? What bothers me? What doesn't bother me? And this can change over time, and there's nothing wrong with that. So, like, back to the example of cursing. If at one point you couldn't stand to have anybody curse around you, but you've built your system up to feel more safe, then now you don't have to have that same boundary because you're aware that it doesn't trigger you any longer, right? Trusting yourself. I'm tired. I feel like taking a nap. You might have a voice that says, no, you don't have time to nap. You have to do X, Y, Z. And you push past that and you take the nap anyway. Or, I want to go outside and play, but that's weird because that's childish. You push past that and you do it anyway. As adults, we are often in trial and error of learning ourselves and undoing the things that were given to us that weren't for us. Okay? And so those are the repair parts that work together. Okay, so I think I went a little bit over. I apologize. Again, I didn't have my notes. I'm sorry, y'all. But I thank you for attending. If you're live, I thank you for viewing it. If you are looking at the replay or if you've purchased it after the workshop, this is how you can find us. This is where you can find us. We're on Facebook and Instagram and a couple other places. If you just put in 360 Citizens, we're kind of everywhere. Our email, our phone number, and we are going to end the recording and we are going to do our Q&A. And again, I thank y'all for attending, and feel free to message or inbox with questions, comments, thoughts. We'd love to hear back from you. Thank you so much.